This is the first episode of a new series on this channel. What we're going to be talking about is women who have been entrepreneurs, icons, innovators in beauty and skincare, and who I don't think really have got the recognition that they deserve. Like, very few of these names are household names. But the things they invented, the things they created, what they founded is absolutely household names. For the first one, we're going to be talking about Dot Ponedel. And a lot of you may not know who Dot Ponedel. I didn't know who she was. It was only when I started doing research about actually other women that this woman came up. The majority of the information comes from Dottie herself. She wrote an autobiography before she passed away. It's called About Face, and it's her version of her story and a little bit of hot gossip. I mean, if you're into gossip from movie stars from the 1920s and 30s, this has got some interesting little tidbits. Who is this woman? Dottie is the first female Hollywood makeup artist, and not just a female makeup artist. It wasn't as if like she was just around and was good, but she happened to be a woman. Like, she was the best. To get an understanding of how big, how like critical this woman was, I want you to think about movies now. I mean, this is in the 1920s. This is when movies first converted over from silent films to talkies. And they were the form of entertainment. I mean, you want to talk about a cultural revolution. I mean, movies are huge now, but back then they were it. It would be the equivalent of Margot Robbie, Jennifer Lawrence, and Sandra Bullock, who are the three highest paid actresses currently. If they all went on strike in order to get the specific makeup artist, like, we don't have anything even sort of comparable. We don't have any type of a hairstylist or a makeup artist or anyone really, cinematographer, who is so desired, so critical that the biggest names in the industry will go on strike, forcing studios to employ this woman because that's how good she was. Her story is that she came in 1920 from Chicago with just her mother. I'm not sure what was happening with her father, and she had a brother, but they're not mentioned at all. And they had very little money. To give you an understanding of what LA was like at this time, LA's population in 1920 was around 570,000 people. So, I mean, small. I think I live in San Francisco. We're at about 750,000, and San Francisco is the smallest big city I've ever lived in. It is wild to me how you get to meet people and run into people here. I cannot imagine what LA was like at 575,000, but it does tell me that a lot of her story is right place, right time. There weren't a lot of people around, and opportunities presented themselves. And that is absolutely how life works. Like, you got to put yourself in the right place. You got to make yourself available for opportunity to find you. And her and her mother came. They bought a furnished house rented a furnished house for $37.50 a month. And next was employment. So they found a bakery that was going out of business, and she bid $100 over the asking price. But this literally was all of their money. And they won. They got the bakery, but they had no money. The bakery was a Van de Kamp's bakery. So Van de Kamp's was still making the food, and then they would deliver the baked goods, the breads, at like 5 a.m, and then her little shop would sell them. And they got really fortunate. And it truly does seem like it was sheer luck with the location of this bakery. This woman isn't humble. She would have said like, oh, I strategically sought out this location. Like, I don't think there was any of that. She just got lucky with this location, and it happened to be near a bus stop, which provided them a lot of traffic in the mornings, a lot of people coming by and getting snacks throughout the day. And one random day, not that long after they bought it, some movie trucks parked out front and came in for donuts. And one of the guys said, like, hey, we need some extras. Do you want to be an extra on our movie set? And she was like, absolutely. I can tell you this, Dot Ponedel was a yes woman. Like, when things were in front of her, she was not shy. She was not afraid to jump into something. She said yes to every opportunity that was in front of her. She got anywhere from like $5 to $7.50 a day for being an extra. And one of the days that she was on set, she met a hula dancer who was in a different movie. And they started talking, and the girl said, hey, if you've got any rhythm, I can teach you how to do this. Dottie was like, okay. And then it turned out that she was like a really good dancer, like a weirdly talented dancer. And she started getting cast as a dancer. And I think Dottie's skin, she's Jewish, but it looks like her skin was a little bit tan. And so, you know, this is the 20s. These are silent films, a lot of these. So they would put her in dark makeup, made her into the hula character, the native character, the Indian character. And she made a name for herself in these silent films for almost a decade, working in silent films as like the buddy character. She's got big relationships with some of the biggest studios, RKO, Paramount, Universal. And she was on set one day, overheard one of the cameramen venting about the leading lady, Nancy Carroll, and that her spit curls, was that it? What do they call them? Yeah, her curls were placed too high up on her cheekbones, and she had a really heart-shaped face, and it was making her face look a little bit too wide. And Dot just heard this and said, well, why don't you shade her face with a darker shade of grease paint? And the guy was like, oh, if you think you can do that, go for it. And they did it, and they ran a little screen test to see what it looked like, and it looked great. And Nancy Carroll loved it. Told the studio, like, I want her to do my makeup. And they said, no, she's our hula dancer or whatever. You can't have her. She's needed on set in another film. And so Nancy Carroll, being a strong-willed woman, said, fine. And she went and did her own makeup, and she did it terribly on purpose. So then they said, okay, get that lady back in here. We need her. And that is how Dot Ponedel got into makeup. She had no experience. She had no idea what she was doing. She says that she studied the art of the great masters, like pictures of paintings, to see how they made faces. But she was really, truly self-taught. This incident with Nancy Carroll is the first, but it is definitely not the last time that a woman put her foot down and said, I get Dot Ponedel to do my makeup, or nobody. In 1930, on the set of the movie Follow Through, very quickly, the male makeup artists in the community hated her. Like, they did not like her. There was no other women doing this. And they didn't like that it was a woman, and they really didn't like that she was doing a good job. And that movie stars were asking for her, demanding her. And they got really mad and said, like, hey, you need to make diagrams for us. You need to explain and show us what you're doing. And that was like, go kick rocks. In fact, what she says, I wouldn't make charts to show them what I was doing. Why should I? The way they were treating me, if they were smart, they would have done the same as I did and take a little from this painting and a little from that and use a little imagination, and they would have had it Ponedel makeup style. Her real big break came very shortly after that, when she started working with Marlene Dietrich, who is, you know, iconic, one of the biggest stars of all time, and was absolutely a massive star at this time. She said, you know, Marlene had the most beautiful face I ever worked on. And then she starts going into describing what she was actually doing, like her makeup style. I did things in the eye, around the eye. I changed the hairline. I made a full lush mouth. I added a subtle white line down the center of the nose, which brought the nose up in case it had any inkling of being flat. I shaded the face when I wanted to get that hollow look. In order to do that, you had to use lighter makeup at the center of the face and darker makeup towards the temples. Then you take the light makeup over the eye, over the lid of the eye, and the darker grease towards the eyebrow, which gives you a long, full lid like Garbo. You know that you would take a good hour's work, but the thing that scared the pants off the stars was after they were done and powdered really well, I would take the pillows of my fingers, dip them in rouge, and go over the skin of the face just where I wanted the pink color to come out. If you didn't know how to touch your fingers, you would spoil an hour or two's worth of work, but I knew just how far to go with my fingers to hit the face. Now this was wet rouge, which would cake the whole makeup you had just worked on. And as I'm reading this, I realize this woman is describing contouring. She is inventing contouring in real time. That is exactly what she was doing. And wet rouge is cream blush. So, what she's also describing here is Patrick Ta's technique for how to do blush. He says to put powder on first, which is kind of the standard thing. Like, you either do all your creams first and then you put your powders on top, or you just do your powders and then that's it. You're not supposed to put cream on powder, but Patrick Ta's technique is to do the powder first and then put the cream on top, which is supposed to give it like a more skin-like finish, which is true, right? It tamps down that powderiness, and that is exactly what she's talking about. So I hate to break it to Patrick Ta, but he did not invent his technique. Dottie Ponedel was doing it 100 years before him. And then she goes on to spill a little bit of tea about Marlena. Like, apparently the woman loved to be naked in her studio and in her dressing room, and was like constantly naked, and also eating tuberose, which are flowers that I had no idea were edible. I have literally never heard of anyone eating tuberose, but apparently Marlena Dietrich did it, and she was pretty gorgeous, so maybe we all need to start eating some more flowers. Another little just fun side story that she put in the book about Marlena is that they were really close friends. And I get the impression that Dot was truly a very likable woman, very generous, very kind. There's something about her that people loved, like love. You know those people that you meet that just people love being around them? When Dietrich went to Paramount, she was the highest paid star in all of Hollywood, even more than the men. And she got in Dot's car, it's an old Ford, one day, and a spring like poked her. I guess it must have been in the seat. And Marlena was like, well, we're gonna fix this. And the next week, a few days later, there was a brand new Ford waiting for Dot in her parking spot on the studio set, which is wildly generous. And apparently she also bought her lots of jewelry and gifts. Like, Marlena Dietrich was apparently very, very generous, always making food for the crew. And, because of her and Mae West, which I'll get into in a second, that is why Dot got a contract at Paramount. It was 100% because of these women, and Marlena Dietrich was the force behind her getting a real contract. And with that contract, Dorothy was able to buy a house. They'd be getting a signing bonus for, I don't know, $250,000 today. Dot did every single movie that Marlena Dietrich made at Paramount. And then, of course, she's got this contract, so she's working with their other stars. And one day she was working Carole Lombard. I mean, the names in this book, I'm just like, sure, no big deal, just working with Carole Lombard. And Carole said she asked Dot to put the white line in her eye like she did for Dietrich, which is very interesting because I'm reading this and I'm like, she's talking about white eyeliner on her waterline. And now she doesn't say that anywhere, but you read between the lines. And then I found this picture of Judy Garland, who was her closest friend. And you can see it in Judy Garland's eye. There is absolutely white eyeliner in that waterline. But if you think about it, like, nobody was doing that back then. So she's using the white liner on the nose. She's using it on the waterline. It's fascinating to me. I'm like, oh my God, we were doing that in the early 2000s. I didn't know I was carrying on a long tradition of makeup artistry. I thought we just looked crazy. Next, she's still working with Paramount, and one of the executives comes up to her and says, hey, we need your help with Mae West. And so she gets introduced to Mae West, and Mae West says in that just, her voice, that iconic voice, like, see what you can do with this face of mine. I can't do it. I sound too masculine. On the spot, Dot had to do something. They were waiting for Mae on set. So she says, now I was up to my dirty work. I pulled out the portraits and pictures of famous artists to see what I could steal from their paintings, like the white in the eye, like the plucked eyebrow, the gaunt look, the full lower lip, and many other little attractions that I used. Mae liked what she did so much that she started doing Mae West's makeup every single day before she would go to the the studio and the set. Dorothy was doing Tallulah Bankhead's makeup when she got a call that her dog had died, and she was beside herself. And this is, again, another example of people, I can't imagine anyone doing this, but on the spot, Tallulah Bankhead and Marlena Dietrich separately, without knowing that the other had done it, called up, I don't know, dog stores, pet stores, and had 2 vans showed up full of dogs for Dot to select from. And so she picked one from each car because she didn't want to hurt any of the women's feelings. Tallulah then wanted her on her other movie that she was working on, which was for Fox. Male makeup artists were in with the executives at these other studios, and the studio executives were like, no. And they told Tallulah that Dot had died, that she had died, and that's why she couldn't have her as a makeup artist. So Tallulah calls up Marlena Dietrich and is like, oh my God, what happened to Dot? And she's like, she laughed. She said, well, if Dot's dead, who did my makeup this morning? The studio executives are they're lying. I mean, the hoops they're jumping through to prevent this woman from being able to work is offensive. On some level, it's comical that they thought they were going to be able to get away with saying that she was dead. But it goes to show you, like, the bias, like what this woman was up against in such a real way. And this is, mind you, after she, at this point, has now been in the movie industry in some capacity for close to 15 years. Even though Dot had contracts, was getting work, she still wasn't allowed in the union. They were aggressively anti-Dot, anti-woman, and they were not going to let her in under any capacity. Eventually, they had to fold because she did have these contracts with the studios, and the studios forced the union to let her in. This book is littered with fun stories, and there's a really good story about Clark Gable conspiring with Dot to get Paulette Goddard into a Cecil B. DeVille film. And Paulette Goddard was married to Charlie Chaplin, which you would think would be enough to get her from the door, but apparently it wasn't. And so Clark Gable came to Dot and was like, hey, DeMille is like, got his heart set on this other actress, but I don't like her. I want Paulette in there. What can we do? And Dot was like, leave it to me. I've got it. So she made her up, made her look beautiful, and then planted Paulette Goddard in DeMille's office. When he came back from lunch, she was sitting in there and just said, I'm the girl you've been looking for. And he gave her the job. And, you know, again, another example of like helping these women. I mean, she is building allies and loyal friends right and left. A horde of women following this woman. They loved her. And apparently, you know, these skills, these techniques that she was doing, nobody else was doing. So on top of just being a really good person, she was also making them look fabulous. And you look at the pictures and it's pretty hard to deny. I mean, these were all very stunning women in the first place. You could have put them in a potato sack and they'd look gorgeous, but she was making them look their best. And, you know, of course, that's going to bond. It's going to ingratiate her in ways that's hard to understand and measure. Also in the 30s, when Dot started doing a little bit more publicity for the studios via magazines. So she did start doing some more diagrams and like tutorials showing some of her techniques to the every woman. And Dot constantly fought rumors and labels, men calling her a lesbian, because you know, she lived with her mom this whole time. Her mom is still living with her. And at some point her brother does come to LA because she gets him a job as a makeup artist too for men. It doesn't seem like there were a lot of men in her life, except for one brief interlude. She was married to a man named Mark. Like, I have a global access membership to Ancestry.com, and so you can look up every birth record, every marriage license. I couldn't find this marriage license. I can't find anything about this man, Mark. But apparently they were married, and it was only for a year. He was in the Army as a transport pilot, and supposedly he came to Dot one night. He was out, flew away, went on a mission or whatever. And she woke up in a cold sweat and just said, Mark's dead. I know he's dead. He just came to me and told me in my dream, and he had died. He actually had died. I love what she writes about what she learned from this experience, being married. Having a mother like I had, I never got to know the joy of a man until I was almost too old to enjoy it. But I made up for lost time when I married the transport pilot and a wonderful man named Mark. He taught me things I never knew before, and now I think of all the happiness and thrills I could have had instead of walking that straight line which had been drilled into my head for so many years. That's why I say, homosexuals, lesbians, French people, or anybody that enjoys sex, live it up as you're only here for a short amount of time. Do what your body enjoys, whether it's in your home or outside, because it's nobody's business as you only walk once through this patch of road. I think it's hilarious. Gays, lesbians, French people. Like, so good. It's so good. It tells you a lot about what people thought of French people. I mean, they still do, like, oh, those crazy, sexually liberated Europeans. It's so good. And, you know, I don't think, even though Dot was only married for a year, she talks about it a lot. Her house was like totally the hangout spot. Everybody hung out there. Judy Garland, Carol Lombard, Clark Gable, directors, Charlie Chaplin and his wife. I mean, it was like a clubhouse. And so she seems like she was never alone or lonely. So after about 10 years, we're talking like early 1940s now, Dot had been with Paramount for over a decade, and the contract was coming to an end, and a lot of her stars had changed studios as well. So she went to MGM, and one of the first actresses that they put her with was Lucille Ball. The first thing she said to Lucille, or Lucille said to her, was, "Now come on, Dottie, make me look beautiful." And she seemed really nervous, like angsty, antsy. And so Dot asked her, like, what is going on with you? And she said, "As soon as this picture's over, I'm going to Reno and I'm divorcing the Cuban." It reminds me so much of my grandmother, the way that she doesn't say his name, but it's like this disparaging nickname. So she's finishing makeup with Lucille Ball, and this hairstylist walks in and he's like, "Hey, I want to introduce you to someone else that you're going to work with next." And it's Judy Garland. And Judy, the way she describes her, it almost sounds like Judy was like very sheepish. And Judy walked up and gave her nose discs and her flippers. Flippers are like teeth covers. And just said, "You're going to need these. I have to wear these." And Dot was like, "I don't really see anything wrong with your nose or your teeth. Why don't we just put these here for later?" And then she put them in a drawer, and it sounds like never used them again. Silicone discs are like little circles that go into your nose that prop the bridge of your nose up to make it a little pointier looking. And then, you know what a teeth cover is. This began, I think, Dot's probably strongest friendships. The first movie they worked together on was in 1944, Meet Me in St. Louis. Really big movie for Judy Garland. And then that relationship just took off, and she did every movie that Judy did after that. So it's about 10 more movies. This is when Dot became really close with Judy's family, like super close with Liza. They were always over at Vincent Minnelli's house, like, and even when Judy wasn't there, like, she goes into like some detail about Judy Garland and her affairs. And she is also extremely defensive of Judy and the claims that Judy was a drug addict. And I get it, like, it's her best friend. In the book, she specifically mentions marijuana and drugs, and it makes it sound like there were people claiming that Judy was a heroin addict or a marijuana drug addict. And like, we know that that's not what Judy Garland was addicted to. That's not the kind of drugs she was into. She was into pills. And that is even mentioned in the book. You know, it's clear that she doesn't think of the pills as a drug addiction. And obviously we know better now. Judy was definitely addicted to them. And it's also mentioned quite frequently how much they drank together. And, you know, Judy was addicted to benzos. And benzos and alcohol are a very deadly combination. So one of the things that really blew me away about Dot Ponedel is this letter that she wrote to the union. Now, she'd already been accepted into the union. She was a member, but right around the time that she was going to leave Paramount and go over to MGM, she had just had enough and wrote the union a letter. And there's a copy of it in this book. And I think it's worth reading the whole thing. In 1942, she wrote a letter. Gentlemen, again, I have been informed that there is a movement to oust me from the union for the crime of being a woman. This certainly is not in keeping with the ideals and purposes for which the unions have been formed and operated. For 13 years, I have been employed in this work, and for a like number of years, I have been a member in good standing and have paid my regular dues to the union. That my work has been the very highest caliber can be attested by the fact that I've always worked for salaries above the minimum scale. Oh, just like, because I bet there's a lot of you in that union that aren't working above minimum. I love that. And that many leading stars have had clauses inserted in their contracts insisting upon my services. However, and notwithstanding this, I have at all times insisted that a makeup man be employed on my set where I have worked, as well as a body makeup girl where there was any of that work to be done. My conduct and my workmanship and my reputation, both as a lady and an artist, is and has always been above reproach, and in a manner that would reflect nothing but credit to the profession and the union. My efforts have been untiring in making women makeup consensus, especially in the moving picture industry where my efforts are well known. This is the second time this ouster movement has been instituted, and I am sure all fair-minded members of the union can see the unfairness of this action. For 13 years, I have devoted my life to this art with ability and enterprise and diligence. The very base of our democratic type of government, the Bill of Rights grants every person the right to pursue gainful employment, and to stop me now would be to deprive me of my means of livelihood. In all fairness, gentlemen, and for the good of the union and this profession, I ask that this action be permanently withdrawn, and please permit me to earn a living peacefully. Yours truly, Dot Ponedel. I'm so impressed with her restraint and her professionalism, because I can tell you, I don't know if I'd be that cool, calm, and collected in writing a letter like this, because it's just infuriating. Because I've never, in all of the research that I've done, ever seen one man get demanded that a star required his services as a makeup artist and put it into their contract. Like, you know, that is never, it's never happened. This is the only time this seems to have happened in the 1920s, 30s. You know, like maybe now, maybe Margot Robbie has a makeup artist that she loves and that's who she works with, and she just, that person travels with her, who knows? But at this time, that was not done. That was not normal. And it's just straight up jealousy, you know, and being threatened. And she persevered and she kept going and she did not let it deter her. Do you know how like easy it would have been to just go, well, you know what? They don't want me here. I'll go back to being a hula dancing girl, or I'll go back to the bakery. I so admire her willpower, the strength of character. We all know how hard it is to keep going when it feels like the wind is coming at you and you're going uphill and it's, you know, you're all by yourself and it seems like nobody is there to like give you a leg up. It's not easy to keep going. And I think that's what I so admire, is her deep, because what it really takes is a deep confidence in knowing that what you're doing is right, that you are talented, confidence and just a deep trust in your ability, and that nobody is going to get in your way. Judy, at this point in the late 1940s, is really, her career is starting to kind of fall apart. I get the impression, I didn't do a ton of research on Judy Garland because that's not what this is about, but it sounds like she the alcohol and the pills were starting to impede her ability to work. You know, she became the stereotypical diva, showing up late, not showing up at all, and it's costing the studios tons of money because they're going to film today and all these people show up, and then Judy is a no-show, or Judy is sick, which it sounds like was the problem, is that Judy was sick a lot. And in 1950, MGM had it, and they fired her. She was on a show on the set for Annie Get Your Gun, and she had just missed so many days. The filming was like 2 months behind schedule, and they just let her go. And this is when Judy went on a concert tour. And it actually ushered in the beginning of a resurgence for Judy's career. But Dot was such a close friend, they went on this concert tour together, and it started in Chicago. And she played a bunch of shows there, and then they went to New York, and they had wild adventures. I mean, there are multiple chapters about her relationship and traveling with Judy. Then they went to London, where she played the Palladium, I think for 6 weeks. And it was all great. Dot came back to LA at the end of that. And unfortunately, in 1951, right at the time when they came back, just a few weeks later, she was diagnosed with MS. And apparently it was really bad, and it progressed really quickly because she retired immediately. And it eventually was her cause of death. And, you know, through complications of that, she died in 1979. And weirdly, I can't also find where she's buried. It seems that she may have been buried in Judy Garland's like personal plot. Like, that's how close they were. Dot Ponedel wrote this. And so it seems like it was almost her last journal entry. And she said, gee, I'm getting tired now. This goddamn MS is starting to work on me. I better hit the hay as I can go on with this book until I could be 100, but I've got to stop somewhere. As I know, Judy is telling me to finish this book and get up here so you can see there is nothing to fear, as the old saying goes, but fear itself. And I have a sneaking feeling that I'm going to have a ball with the bunch that's way up there waiting for me now. I loved the life I led. It was exciting and full of fun. And every moment of my life meant something to me. I always tried to help the other guy. So why did I have to get this sickness that slowly kills you and nobody can help you? Well, someday when I'm pushing up daisies, they'll find a cure. And even though I won't be there, I'll be thankful for the other guys. So laugh and be merry as long as you can. I think I will close as I have a long journey ahead of me without any fears or regrets. Well, I'm coming to a stop now as I need to take it easy and be ready for what comes next. So that is the story of Dot Ponedel. You know, Hollywood's first female makeup artist, a revolutionary woman who opened up the path for other women to follow in her footsteps, be it in makeup or hair or anything to do with these movies. You know, she was a pioneer. Also, please think about Dot Ponedel every time you're putting on contour, because that woman is the one who created that whole technique. Thank you so much for those of you who sat through this and who listened to the whole story. This is going to be a series that I've got a bunch of other women lined up. I'm so excited about this. This is, you know, truly the intersection of where my passions lie. Like, I love skincare and makeup. I love history separately. When I can combine those two, not only is it just like, oh, it's so delicious. I love the history, but it gives me a deeper appreciation of where we are and how we got here. And I think it's just incredible to celebrate these women.